So, moving over the page, we have the ideas of a pair of writers called Blake and Mouton. Now, there are a number of ways in which management theories, all the theories that we have in paper F1, there are a number of places that they come from. Some theorists sit down and think about something, and they basically come up with an idea in their heads. This is what should happen. This is what I think. Other theorists basically have gone out and watched people and seen what people actually do, and then come back and said, I have now come up with a theory based on what I have observed. And Blake and Mouton is one of those second kinds. So it's all about going out, watching what people do, and then coming back and saying, I can divide managers up into a number of different types. And that's what Blake and Mouton did. So the various different things that Blake and Mouton are thinking about, the most important of them is they said that some managers are particularly concerned with tasks, some managers are particularly concerned with people. Now, we said a few minutes ago with Adair that all managers should be interested in the tasks, they should be interested in the team and in the individual. So in other words, some things are to do with people, some things are to do with tasks. Now, managers have to pay attention to all of those, but some managers concentrate more on one bit, some managers concentrate more on other bits. So what Blake and Mouton did is they came up with a graph, they came up with a grid. They said, we can divide managers up. We will give them a rating, we will give them a score between 0 and 9 for how seriously they take the tasks that their team has got to carry out. So a score of 9 means they take it very seriously. Score of 0 means they're really not that bothered. Similarly, 0 to 9 for how they look after their people. So how much of their time is spent talking about people. So 9, they spend a lot of time with people. 0, they really couldn't care less. Now, you can put any manager in any situation anywhere on that grid. You could get people, for example, who are perhaps somewhere towards the top left or somewhere towards the bottom right. But what you'll get tested on in the exam is the 4 extremes, the 4 corners, plus the one in the middle. So basically, what Blake and Mouton said was, here are 4 extremes, and managers might be closer to one of these extremes rather than to something else. So, the 5 extremes that we have, first of all, down in the bottom right-hand corner, we have what's called a task-focused manager. A task-focused manager basically does not care about the individuals at all. All of their time is spent making sure that tasks get done. Now, you again remember that these are extremes that Blake and Mouton have come up with, so you don't actually find that many managers who are like this. If they are like this, maybe it's because of their personality. They like ordering people around and not listening to them. Or perhaps it's because of the situation. So, for example, you could make an argument that something like the armed forces, the military, you would get lots of managers there who are task-focused managers. Somebody who is in charge of a squad of troops in the army probably doesn't worry too much about, are the soldiers going to like the orders that I'm about to give them? It's all about doing what you've been told to do, because that's appropriate in that kind of situation. So a task-focused manager says, do what I'm telling you, and I don't want to hear anything more about it. Now, as I say, there is nothing wrong with that in the right circumstances. The second one that I will mention is the one in the opposite corner, in the top left-hand corner, which is what's called a country club manager. A country club manager basically spends all their time making sure that the people are happy, making sure that the individuals are motivated. Now, that can be a very good thing. That can be a very bad thing. The idea in theory is that if you simply get a good group of workers, people who are, going to work particularly hard, particularly that you can leave them on their own to work particularly hard, you simply make sure that they are motivated and then you get out of their way and let them get on with the work. So the types of places you tend to find this are things like creative industries. So where you have to have people coming up with ideas. The important thing here is recruit the right people, make sure that they are motivated, and then let them get on with things. So a country club manager can work very well because you simply let the individuals get on and do the things that they're good at without getting in their way. It can, of course, be a complete disaster because if you've chosen the wrong people, if your recruitment that we talked about earlier, if your recruitment is poor, all that will happen is you'll say to these workers, go away and do something, and they won't do anything because you're not checking up on them. So country club management can be very good under appropriate circumstances. On the other hand, it can be a disaster. So country club management. Down in the bottom left-hand corner, what's called an impoverished manager basically doesn't really care about anything. So an impoverished manager is not interested in getting the tasks done. An impoverished manager is not interested in the people. Now you might say to yourself, when would that ever happen? When would you have a manager who doesn't really care about anything? Hopefully, not very often. However, there are circumstances where you might get something like that. Let's say, for example, that you have a manager in charge of a department and the department is being closed. Everybody knows that in 1 month's time that department is going to be closed. Well, maybe the manager doesn't really care. Maybe the manager has handed their notice in. They are leaving to go somewhere else. Why would they care? Maybe, and again, hopefully this won't happen, but maybe the manager has actually been promoted too far. The manager knows that they are not actually able to do the job properly. So what do? They just give up. They just don't really bother with anything. Now, hopefully, that one won't happen very often, but unfortunately, it does come up occasionally. The star in the middle there, a middle-of-the-road manager, I think that one speaks for itself. That's a manager who is average at everything. So they do spend some time looking after the people, they do spend some time concentrating on the tasks. And I would imagine that most managers we come across in real life are probably somewhere near to that one. However, Blake and Mouton did identify some very, very, very good managers. And these particular managers are the ones that everybody should try and aim towards. They're the ones in the top right-hand corner. They worry about the tasks and they worry about the people. Now, I have been very lucky because I have actually worked for two people who I think are, out of anywhere on that grid, they are closer to the top right-hand corner than anywhere else. One particular manager that I worked for knew that there were certain times of the year, certain times of the month, when we were going to be busy. And when we were going to be busy, the manager would come round and basically make sure that all the work was done. They would check the work, they would give us lots of tasks to do, they would make us stay late if the tasks needed doing. So they made sure all the tasks got done. However, once the tasks were done, often what the manager would say was, you have worked really hard this week. We had this task that we had to complete. Now it is done. Next week, we will have a much more restful week. So, come in late each day next week. Or come in the normal times and take an extra day off. So they would deliberately make sure that there'd be 1 week or one period where we were concentrating very much on a task and working really hard to get it done. But then once that was done and out of the way, then they would deliberately make the next week a lot lighter. If there were any tasks to be done the second week, they would try and postpone them. So we had a bit of a break. Now that meant that we all really liked working for that manager because we respected them. When the work was there to be done, it was done, but then the manager would be, in effect, give something back to us. A really good manager to work for. Now, I hope that you work for a manager who is like that. If not, maybe you can try and persuade them to be like that. So Blake and Mouton, kind of way that will be examined in the test. It may well be that you get, again, here are 4 different types of manager. One of them is a name that they've made up. So one of them they've invented and isn't one of Blake and Mouton's. Or alternatively, the way that I can see Blake and Mouton being tested is they give you a little example. They say, here is the manager. This is what the manager does. What kind of manager do you think they are? Where would Blake and Mouton put them? And it will be one of those 4 corners, usually.